on the ground. You can come all the way up if you want. This is like the old theater days. I haven't done theater in the round in a long time. But I'm so excited, Dan, for you to be here, for Upswell to be back in Los Angeles for the first time, I think in a decade. So welcome home, welcome back. We hope to see you all here. How many people, just quick show of hands before I say a few things, are from LA or LA area? Okay, and how many from out of town? Okay, pretty evenly split. Well, for those of you lucky enough to be from LA, congratulations. For those of you smart enough to have come to LA, thank you. We hope that you have seen, if you especially haven't been here in a long time, you see something new, that you see a different city rising up from what you might have thought about LA. Anybody here for the first time in LA? Oh, good. I should just do an interview with you guys. So what's it like? You like us? Yeah. LA, let me just give you a few things, and then I want to jump into this kind of moment and hopefully give some words of reflection and inspiration. LA is now the third largest economy in the world. Now, people count economies in all kind of different ways. They have GNPs for our nations. They have sometimes state economies. People often say California, for instance, would be the fifth largest economy in the world if it was an independent country. But to me, countries are sometimes the accidents of history and boundary drawing, as are states. Cities are the last kind of organic political entity in the world. People come to decide to stay in or move to cities by and large because of their own freedom of movement and choice. And by that measure, cities are, even though we chop them into a lot of jurisdictions, I mean, Thousand Oaks is part of this city just like LA is part of Thousand Oaks' city. We are part of an 18 million person continuous city without rural areas or a break that is now the third largest urban economy in the world. Tokyo's number one, New York's number two, and we're almost the size of New York now. Almost $1 trillion economy, only 22nd in population, so it's the most productive per capita economy in the world. But it's also the most diverse collection of human beings ever put in one place in human history, not just on the earth today, but in history. By one measure, the University of Southern California did, for instance, it's somewhere between maybe 30 and 40 countries that have their largest populations outside their home country here in LA. So this is the largest population of Armenians outside of Armenia, the largest population of Thais outside of Thailand, largest population of Koreans outside of Korea. It's the second largest city of people of Mexican descent, including all of Mexico. It's Mexico City, LA, back to Mexico for number 3. This amazing kind of coming together of culture, of innovation, of obviously great weather, and challenges that have come with the popularity of being a city that people want to come to. Our main issues, our two biggest challenges, that of housing and with that homelessness and traffic, really are a reflection that so many people are here, we haven't built out an infrastructure to either house or move them. It's a good problem to have, as bad as the manifestations can be, but it's also a reflection that we continue to attract some of the greatest dreamers and doers in the world here in LA. But let me step back from LA for a moment, because I'm excited to have the independent sector here today, which is something difficult, I know, for a lot of people to define, but something that you intimately understand, and something that I, as a leader and as a mayor, really depend on in the work that I and my brother and sister mayors do around this nation and around the world. This is a really tough moment. It's a tough moment in the specific of both the time and place you just heard. Somebody asked me 2 weeks ago how I was feeling. It came the week after pipe bombs were sent to journalists and political leaders, the week after 2 African Americans were shot and killed for being black after somebody couldn't get into a black church where he wanted to kill even more folks, and after 11 Jews were killed in Pittsburgh. And I stopped in my tracks and I thought and I breathed in for a moment and I said, I feel really broken and I feel really strong. And I was surprised at the words that came out of my mouth because they're a contradiction. You can either feel broken or strong. This was before the elections even of last Tuesday. But I felt something stirring in the midst of the pain that we are all going through, of this moment of division and subtraction. I felt a kind of stirring of an addition and multiplication. And not just in the political realm, though it certainly was alive and well there. The strength that I was beginning to feel included a visit from students from Parkland who came together with students who live with gun violence here in Los Angeles and have also seen their peers and loved ones shot and killed, maybe not as dramatically in a single day, but even more intensely over time, who demanded that I as a mayor do something. and we convened a student advisory council to me as the mayor on gun violence to build on already pretty ambitious and accomplished gun work that we were doing in this city and this state. And they went a step further, seeing the interconnectivity with politics, and they said, we want you to be the first mayor in the country to promise that on voter registration day you will have a voter registration drive in every high school in this city. We added the community colleges to that. Even though I'm not in charge of the schools, we made the promise, we figured it out with the school district. And then that led to over 200 cities and mayors doing the same thing, which led to the annual voter registration day, which obviously isn't the only day that people register. A previous record in this country was 300,000 registrants in one day. And this year, led by the students of this country, when other leaders learned how to follow them, we registered 800,000 people in one day in the United States of America. I felt that strength stirring when we had leadership, or lack of leadership, from the White House some year and a half ago, when President Trump announced he was going to take America out of the Paris Climate Accords, which it's important to remember we haven't yet done. We're not out of them. He just indicated that isn't formally going to be done till 10 days after the next presidential election. I'm just saying. So instead of going into a corner and crying about it and saying, oh, that president, and why is he so powerful, and why are we so weak, and gosh darn it, or something worse, I picked up the phone because with two other mayors 2 years earlier, before we even had a President Trump, we founded something called Climate Mayors, knowing that most of the activity, no matter whether it's a Republican or a Democrat in the White House, around combating climate change, happens in cities, led by city councils and mayors and supervisors at the county level. It has to do with power generation and building codes and transportation networks. And so that network had grown, and we started calling that day, and we got 40 cities that day to say, if the White House is out, we're in. We'll take the pledge to actually implement Paris on our own. And that 40 the next day became 100. And that 100 grew to 200, and 200 to 300. And today, 409 cities in 47 states have said, if he's out, we're in, because this is too important to us. And that was part of the strength that I've been feeling in this moment in this nation. But it's tough also not to feel broken at this moment. We're human beings. We're fragile by nature, even if we're resilient by design. If we stop feeling, we stop caring, and it's tough not to feel right now what this moment is like. Part of it is just the time we live in. I came up with a new term a couple months ago about this feeling right now of like both being so excited about the future and so anxious about the future. I call it anxitement, right? You know that feeling like right before you're about to give a speech, you're like, I can't wait to go on. Oh, I don't want to go on. Or when you apply it to the world today, it's like technology has never been more interesting, more cool. I can be in another state, tuck my 6.5-year-old daughter Maya in bed via FaceTime in a way that never could before. We have some sort of intimate connection, even though I'm, maybe 1,000 miles away. And yet that same technology, which allows you to get something delivered that you just think of and say out loud to a machine, arrives 2 hours later at your door. You wonder if that's going to work you or a relative out of a job. Your uncle who's the truck driver, or somebody who works in a factory, will there be work for them? That's anxitement. Or that there's cures to diseases, that my daughter and her generation, a child born today, is going to be expected to live to 100 years old. Things that used to kill us, we can get past. But at the same time, we're all one medical emergency away from bankruptcy, or 90-something% of this nation is, and we're not having a real conversation about healthcare that will get down to that deep level that you could live to 100, but that's going to be on average, and there will be people based on their race and their geography and their income who will get nowhere close to that number because of things that are beyond their control. That's anxitement. And as a mayor, every day I'm excited. Every day there are things that make me so excited to lead an urban area. I'm reminded, if you've not been to City Hall, go to the top floor of City Hall, which was the tallest building for many years here in LA. And there's all these different sayings from different philosophers and from the Bible and Abraham Lincoln. And one of them that I really like is from Aristotle, and it's from his Politics. And it says that the city came into being to preserve life, but it exists for the good life. So in other words, the city came into being to preserve life. We came to protect ourselves from the chaos of the world out there, to find and to develop. But it doesn't exist just to protect us. The point of the city is to find and to define for each one of us what is the good life. It's that moment of falling in love with somebody. It's that moment of seeing a concert or a play that moves us or makes us think. It's a child going to a library and seeing her horizons open up because she's living in a city where not only does she read about something, but then there's a company that's working on that she can go to, that's going to get a rover onto Mars, or that's going to tell the story and stream it on Netflix. There's these things that we have in cities that have always pushed humanity forward. But cities are also where we concentrate our problems of poverty, of pestilence, of all the things that give us stress. For me, every single day, and the issue I work the most on is homelessness, which is the ultimate manifestation of so many different things. It's not just a housing crisis. It's not just a criminal justice issue. It's not just an issue of our foster care system in America or our veterans who suffer from PTSD. It's not just an issue of high rents and low wages. It's not just an issue of mental health or drug addiction. It's all of those things conspiring together. It's the failure of all of us at all levels to have not figured out a way to just get those problems indoors, and most importantly, to solve them. But I'm really excited about this city, and I hope that you'll spend some time digging deep into what we're doing, because here we've passed not just one, but the two largest measures in American history at the local level to end homelessness, to build permanent supportive housing for 10,000 units worth for probably more people than 10,000, 15 or 20,000 people who will be able to live in there. A quarter-cent sales tax that gives us $350 million for services every year for a decade, combined about $4.5 billion to finally say, in this place that has numerically the most homeless Americans of any city, even if we're lower per capita than some other places, and we share this burden with Seattle and San Francisco and Washington, D.C., and even places like New York and Boston who are seeing upticks. Trying to figure out what we can do gets me very excited, because I think we know what to do. And that's one of the central things I want to leave with you here today. We have to live in this age of excitement, figuring out what I started with, how we can multiply and add to each other's lives. I'm obsessed with this every single day, because what I hear coming out of Washington, D.C. mostly are the politics of division, right? Even before that, the politics of subtraction. Like literally, some people define their success by what they can take. Take away health care, take away immigrant protections, take away women's reproductive rights, take away our coastlines, take away environmental protections, take things away, and that you can actually pat yourself on the back and say, I've taken something away from Americans and I'm successful. And I just don't get that. That's never been, to me, what this nation is about. And when they're not taking from us, they're dividing us. You're upset, you should be upset. And let me tell you who you should be upset with. It's somebody whose immigration status is different, whose religion is different, whose geography is different. It's not just race, it's not just gender, it's, oh, hate the coastal people, or hate the rural people, or hate whoever. And we can never be a nation. I know there's been a lot of talk about nationalism these days, and there certainly are perverted and negative manifestations of nationalism. I, for one, have always embraced the idea of the nation, because unlike the state, which is just a list of rules and regulations and formal government, the nation is the people. This independent sector is the nation. We are the nation. We should define an inclusive, radical nationalism that includes all of us, has room for all of us, not to I actually prefer, more than diversity, inclusion, tolerance, the word belonging. Because nobody has to give you permission. Nobody has to include you. We all belong here. Los Angeles is a city built on belonging. We're an imperfect paradise out here. We won't sugarcoat our problems. And not everybody always feels they belong. But we're built on that idea that we all belong. And this is a nation, I believe, that's also been built on that as well. So as we look at the work that we're doing here, we're trying to tackle those problems and figure out a way to do that in a way where everybody is about adding to each other's lives and multiplying that success. How do you solve homelessness when the federal government needs to contribute, the state needs to contribute, counties have the health care and the anti-addiction and the veterans programs and all of those pieces, and cities just have police and public works that can clean the street, but you can't clean or police or arrest your way out of homelessness. It requires all of us to get together to put down those boundaries. Here in the city, we took that on with homeless veterans. We had 9,000, the most in this, sorry, 6,000, the most in this country, and now we've housed more than 9,000 because of newly homeless folks, with only 2,000 left on our streets, the most in America. But we did that not by saying this would be just a job for the federal government, or just a job for City Hall, or just a job for the County of LA. It was all of our jobs. And it wasn't just a job for government, too. Dan Manrique, one of those victims you just heard about in Thousand Oaks, was 2 years ago, 2 days ago, at my house, where we had a Veterans Day luncheon for veterans who are coming off the street from homelessness. He was a Marine, as you heard, and he was working with St. Joseph's Center here, which is helping to house veterans who are living on our streets. And I didn't know he had been killed until somebody sent me from my team a day after the shooting last week, a picture of the two of us together at my house, and it hit me, and I remembered him. The tragedy of him being taken from us before his wings could continue to sail makes me want to redouble those efforts of leaving nobody behind in honor of what Dan would have given us, and knowing that it's not just something for us to own from government. It's not just something for us to own as vets. It's something for all of us to own together. With climate change, it's the same thing. We know that as institutions step up, and universities and companies, together with local government, who cares what the national government's doing? It could be President Clinton, and the work would still be in our community, and we should be just as excited that 409 cities pledged to implement Paris as when it's President Trump, and you might feel an extra we showed him, because it's not really about him, it's about us. So as we break down these barriers at this moment to find and to define what does that good life look like for each one of us, I hope you will look to LA. Whether it's here, where the birthplace of the Me Too and Time's Up movement, where long before those hashtags had the expansion of the last year, we worked with Mount St. Mary's College right here to look at gender not as a policy area to segregate off, but as a central prism to refract every single thing we do, that all 37 of my general managers have to report every single year to me, of doing in 6 months, making the commissioners who oversee our departments. There's about 350 civilians who oversee our police department, and the port, and the airport, and our fire department. I made sure that over half of them, for the first time in our history, were women, just because I had the power to do it. I thank some good men for their service, and it was the right thing to do. And the private sector says that government's slow. And we're trying to get 10% or 15% onto boards and into C-suites. So be inspired by LA, because we're taking those bold steps. When you look at infrastructure and jobs and middle-class opportunities, here we put everything on the line. And in 88 cities in the county of Los Angeles, we passed the largest infrastructure package at the local level in American history times 2 years ago with something called Measure M. We're building 15 rapid transit lines and hiring local people to do that, and building an industrial base, and not just giving jobs for a year or two of a line, but it's a permanent tax. We have plans for the next 40 years of it, but 40 years after that, it'll keep going, to make sure that we have Americans who can grow up, whose parents and grandparents might have been on the assembly line in South LA putting bombers together that helped win World War II. Now they can put, rail cars together and build new technologies as they emerge, from Hyperloop to monorail to who knows what we will do with, I'm sorry for all the electric scooters, but enjoy them, on the sidewalks as well. This is a moment of excitement, and we have to find the excitement and make sure that everybody feels that in equal measure. So welcome to the City of Angels. For those of you who are here and are from LA, let me say this. It was Proust who once said, I think the voyage of discovery is not in going to new places, but in seeing the world through new eyes. Whether that's through somebody who's coming to LA for the first time and hearing them and seeing how they see our city, so that we don't accept that people should be living in tents on our streets because people are horrified the first time they see it, or when they say something incredible and wonderful that we take for granted in this city because we walk past it every single day, from the good weather to the art and culture that is here, to the innovation that is driving us. And let us come back together as an independent sector and government sector and break down those barriers between us. This is a moment when I think the American people are more willing to do things so outside the box. A, because we're innovators, and B, because we're frustrated. You know, think about it. You have folks who are saying we should be building our infrastructure with public-private partnerships, and some think that that's a conspiracy to give public assets to the private sector, but it's not. We're doing that here in LA to build things quicker and cheaper. And on the flip side, people who never thought they'd be for things like raising the minimum wage or talking about single-payer healthcare are like, gotta try something. Or even housing itself. Why is housing such a private marketplace thing when if it was just treated as a utility? You go to the most hyper-capitalist places like Hong Kong and Singapore, they've realized they will never be able to house all their people in decent housing if they don't have a public housing program. And we haven't even had that conversation in this nation for decades. The best we can do is try to redevelop a few things that were built in the 40s and 50s for returning GIs, but we won't do that now for those same veterans that are on our streets. It is a time to be bold, it is a time to be big, but it is time to be loving as well. It is a time for a nation that is unified, that is free, and that is looking at that future with, yes, a little bit of anxiousness, but hopefully a lot of excitement. And I hope that you see and feel that here in LA. And please, you know, if we can be helpful to anything that you're doing, let me know and let the network of mayors know. There are 10,000 local communities. And if, you know, the United States Congress has a 20% approval rating, they have a party. But local officials get reelected with 50 and 60 and 70 and 80% votes, not because everybody loves us. Trust me, I can give you a list of addresses of people who don't love me and let me know every single day. But that's the point. We're engaged in democracy. We're engaged in a way that people see and in a way that people deserve. And we expect the same out of the people we represent as what they expect from us, to be engaged, to take this broken moment, and to be strong. Thank you all so much.